All right, there's a lovely buzz around the room, but we're going to come back just because I only have an hour. So what kinds of interests came up at your table? Can people call out nice and loudly the interests that people have?
Being in the water.
Pardon me?
Being in the water.
Being in the water, yep. Sport in general.
Health and well-being.
Health and well-being.
Continuing in the jobs they're already in.
Like what kind of?
A range of
Jobs.
Supporting clients.
Okay.
Minecraft.
Minecraft, of course.
Wrestling promotion.
Wrestling, great.
Drawing and rowing.
Drawing and rowing, okay. Good. So one of the things is, what I love is that when we kind of talk about the interests that people have and we raise them up and we say, you know, there's Minecraft here, there's drawing and rowing here, there's jobs and holding jobs here, there's wrestling over there. We just know in typical ordinary society, these are the interests that all kinds of people have, and they're pursuing them in hundreds and hundreds of different ways. And the exciting thing is that's the community that we get to work in, rather than the narrow specialized community that programs kind of come up with people who might have some interest in disability services, right? So that's the first thing I always kind of think about. And the other thing is that that's why it's really, really important as we go through a few steps in expanding your thoughts about these interests that we don't, in fact, narrow things down too soon with a yes, but. Right? And so people around your table in the next little while might give you some ideas. Write them all down. It might not sink right now, but it might tweak something else in the future, right? Don't limit things. Think about how anyone with an interest in wrestling might pursue that interest, right? Because one person might be a wrestler, one might become a fan of a wrestler, one might be someone who's interested in promoting wrestling, one might just join I don't know what you call them, a studio or a place where you do the wrestling and just help to hang out and have a role as an assistant trainer or something like that. There are many, many ways to kind of enter into the space and interest of wrestling, and you just don't want to narrow yourself with just the one or two that you can think of and turn everyone else's interest away. Okay. Now, how many people here were at the session yesterday, and who was here yesterday? Okay. So who's brand new? Okay, not so many. So I'm just going to repeat a couple of short stories, just because I think I want people to think about the interest they have in mind. And what I'll try to do is kind of bring out the stories and bring out things that you might want to think about in that area of interest or the roles that you're developing. And so this might just give you some additional ideas on expanding that. And then we're going to kind of stop and start in several points along the way of developing roles that are really quite powerful. When I did my smaller session yesterday, people kind of met Jonathan, and one of the things that we talked about for sure was his interest in dogs in particular, and for a long time he had this pet dog. And one of the things that was great is that the moment that Jonathan got a dog, he wasn't just a dog lover, he became a pet owner, a dog owner. And because he was a dog owner, he became a dog walker. And for a young man, he was younger at the time, who isn't too interested in health and fitness and kind of keeping fit, being a dog walker was a real blessing to those of us who were more interested in his health and well-being. The way we think about things, however, is that this is kind of limited. He's a dog owner and he's a dog walker, all very well and good. But what else could he take on in terms of dog owner that would be more interesting and bring him more into contact with other people on a frequent and regular basis? You remember that from yesterday, those kinds of comments. We're always looking for people to be in ordinary places and community on a frequent and regular basis. And so we started to think about where are the other dog owners around Pickering. And it doesn't take very long to think about that people walk their dogs. If you have dogs, in our area of the world, we have dog walking parks. Do you have dog walking parks? So we thought, oh, Jonathan should turn up at the dog walking park. And it didn't take us long to think about. Probably early in the morning and later in the afternoon would be the most common time for him to meet up with other dog owners. And so Jonathan started going to the dog walking parks. Not the morning one, he's not a morning guy, but he went to the afternoon one, and he'd go at least 3 or 4 times a week, and indeed was meeting the same people time and time again. And then we thought, well, gee, he's meeting the same people. He's actually not a person who uses language to communicate. And so, people were very friendly toward him, but after a few kind of, hello, Jonathan, how are you? How is your dog, Rain? Kind of thing, the conversation was always a little bit stilted. And we were trying to think of how do we carry on the conversation, right? And so someone who's interested in dogs and is a dog owner and a dog walker and a frequenter of the dog park, all of those ER words are role words, by the way, and carry impact, right? What else could we do to stimulate the conversation and kind of expand this common ground that people have between them, all of the dog owners? And we thought, well, it would be really cool if maybe we could try some dog biscuit recipes with Jonathan. And bring homemade dog biscuits to the park. And maybe he would have a couple of varieties. Maybe he would specialize in organic ingredients, and he could bring those along to the park. And then they could have a conversation. If he had 2 or 3 kinds of biscuits, what were the most popular? Who knows? Anyways, he started to do that. And I have to say, someone said yesterday, you have to tell us about some of the mistakes, some of the things that didn't go well. Actually, that ended right there. He just wasn't interested in dog biscuits. But, the best of our minds just keep on rolling and rolling. And this is where I was going with this anyways. And it's a great idea if someone wants to steal it. We're going to help him. We did help him make the dog biscuits, but we're thinking if there were kind of 2 or 3 recipes that were really, really of interest to the other dog owners, wouldn't you just package them up and begin to sell dog biscuits to other dog owners? And then why wouldn't you go and see if you couldn't get a little piece of someone's table at the farmer's market or the local market and sell biscuits? Yes.
We actually did this with our son.
And?
We were making it so that 10% of the proceeds went to RSPCA, so
Oh.
it was also then taken around
Excellent.
RSPCA.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a wonderful, wonderful thing, but much in the same way, eventually he just wasn't interested.
Yeah. And you know what? Of all the stories I tell, there's all the stories that, don't go, but taught us lots. And if I had, my favorite new word in Australia is butcher's paper, because we just call it flip chart paper. Butcher's paper sounds so much nicer. If I had my butcher's paper, I would have, Jonathan as dog lover kind of in the center as the central role. And coming off of that is dog owner and dog walker and dog biscuit maker and dog biscuit enterprise owner, that kind of thing, right? And there's just all of those roles have opportunity for interaction, and you try to massage the ones where the interaction happens on the most frequent basis. So you tried it, even if that doesn't go as fully where you want, you just turn to the next and the next, because it's a wide, abundant world out there. Great. The other one, I talked about John's small business. This is Rob. One of the roles I didn't talk about Rob. Rob is a great fan of classical music, and it took us a long time to figure out what kind of music he was particularly interested in, and it ended up being classical music. And so one of the things that we helped him to do was to become a fan of the local symphony orchestra, and he went to the practices every week. And so what's one reason that we would kind of try to get him to the practices rather than just going to the concerts?
Build relationship.
And how would that happen more easily at the practices?
Not so many people around and not so noisy.
Absolutely.
Could be heard.
Yeah. And it's a little bit, at the beginning and end, there's a fewer people around, and it happens every single week, whereas the concerts are usually every 2 or 3 months, right? And people are focused on the music, and they're not really focused on the relationship piece. So getting people's practices, rehearsal times are really, really powerful. And so many people will say to me, yeah, but you just don't understand my son or the person I'm planning for. There's no way that he's going to put up with a 2-hour symphony rehearsal. Well, that would have been Rob. But you really have to meet people where they are and really understand how to stretch and grow people if you think the potential is really great. And so one of the things that we discovered is that the practice actually has a coffee break right in the middle. And it's actually a coffee and donut break. And one of the things that Rob really likes is coffee and donuts. And so with the permission and understanding of the conductor of the orchestra, Rob in the beginning, and Rob's not a guy that we can sit in his home and say, Rob, guess what? Tonight is the orchestra rehearsal and we're going to go there and you're just going to love it. That really just isn't the way he thinks about and plans for things. He wouldn't know most of the things we were talking about. So we just actually had to get him there and give him the good experience. And so what we did is, with the permission and understanding of the conductor, we would arrive about 5 minutes before coffee break. Right? 5 minutes, he would walk in, he would get used to the room, he's kind of listening to the music, he's kind of really liking this, and then there's coffee and donuts, an absolute reward for something that he already has enjoyed. And then we would help him stay. And during that time, he could walk around and stuff, and then he stayed for about 10 minutes after, and then we left. And then the next week, we'd arrive 5 or 7 minutes early and then have coffee and donuts, stay a little while longer, and left. And we aren't on a time schedule. It didn't matter if this, and in fact, it took us months to develop. But we had a plan. And what we wanted him to do was to get to the orchestra practice about 10 or 15 minutes before the start of the practice, because that's where people are all unpacking their instruments, they're talking to each other. If he's near the front door, he can kind of greet people as he comes in. People would get to know him and say hello to him, right? And that's one of the mistakes that we often make in helping people to get to places on a frequent and regular basis, is we kind of think it's okay, lots of people arrive late or just on time is just fine. But really, again, if we're trying to help people build a relationship as part of the role, we really need to pay attention to getting to places before on time, right? 10 minutes before, and really get a scope for things. That's how Rob met some of these folks. They were the ones in that kind of loose 10 or 15 minutes before who kind of came over and were curious about him and welcomed him and got to know his name early on. And this was at one of their break times where they were actually playing their individual instruments for him and interacting in that way. Okay. This is Rob. Everyone knows this one in his Carolyn. Carolyn, one of the things with Carolyn is she's a person that retired from work at age 35. And the reason she retired from work at age 35 is she had had about 7 or so years of work experience, and she kept going into these 3 months work experience programs, and with the promise of a job if she did well enough. So she was entirely tense and anxious the whole time, doing the very best she could, and it never turned into paid work for her. So at 35, she said, okay, if that's work, I don't want it, right? And here she is at about 42, where we called her out of retirement by starting a small job development, very, very small. And we kind of really tried to do some good job matching. We made sure it was paid from day one. So she only did in the beginning about 2 hours a week. And she's a library page, which is a legitimate role at our local, this was at the city library, actually, a large library. And, again, the role was really clear, library page, and you go into these places and there's actually about 20 or 30 different tasks that are related to that role. And because they would have several library pages working at the library at any one time, it was the kind of role where we could pick and choose the ones that fit Carolyn best. She's really, really detailed and finicky, and so lining the books at the edge of the library, they absolutely loved her for that role. John, trying to think what else I wanted to say about John. Oh, only that just how powerful it is when you kind of pay attention to the things that people are really interested in rather than what you're interested in them doing. John worked at Burger King for years. Do you have Burger King here, a fast food restaurant? And we were proud of the fact that he had a kind of a 20-hour job, and it was paid, and it was kind of appropriate for a younger person when he started. But we all, and we were kind of clear that he needed a lot of job coaching and probably ongoing job coaching. He had job coaching for years, but it helped him to keep that job. And then finally one day he just walked away, and I think it's because we weren't listening. And we were kind of forced to start all over again. And by that time, we knew more about following people's interests. That's a Maple Leaf hockey T-shirt. And he was so interested in the hockey that it just made sense to get him a kind of a hockey-related job. And here he is. In Canada, the big machines that clean the ice are called Zamboni machines. And his dream is to drive the Zamboni machine. He's not there yet, but this is another role-related thing, and that is, sometimes people can get closer and closer to it. And so this is a floor polisher that goes when the ice isn't there beneath the ice. You have to polish that floor up pretty well, especially during the summer months or just before you ice it again. And he's become very, very good on that machine. And we just know, he knows that this is a stepping stone to the Zamboni, right? And feels he's got his water up there, and this is his job. The other thing that we learned about work in particular is that, there are jobs, I'm told there's discrete tasks and tasks that take more judgment. And for lots of people, they just get more success of having a discrete task where there's a beginning and an end, and people can understand when they've kind of finished the job. And often we end up, as Bruce was saying, in lots of those cleaning jobs, there's endless floor spaces. And we really need to help people kind of divide that up into discrete tasks if that's part of the role that they're taking on. Just one little story about John. He, at this hockey arena, he really, really loves cleaning out the penalty box, kind of getting that ready for the next game. And I say, oh, you're thinking of the captain or the assistant captain going in there on a penalty. And he tells me he's looking for blood, right? Because he really is a hockey fan, not a fake there. Okay. And Tiffany, one of the roles that Linda, her mom, has really, really helped Tiffany with is the role of host. And with so many people I've been involved with who have homes of their own, that's a role that really, really can take good attention. And I think that when people moved into their own homes, I've always said that the first 3 years we paid lots of attention to them being, hosts and kind of queens and kings of their own castles. And that investment was over like a 3-year period, that's where most of the attention went. And after people felt really safe and secure and in charge of their own homes, that's when they were kind of more open to doing things out and about. And so this was a great idea, and that is that Tiffany loves to have parties. She hates to trim her Christmas tree. Linda wasn't interested in trimming her Christmas tree forevermore, so she started this tradition about 15 years ago of hosting a Christmas tea. And at the Christmas tea, everyone who comes trims her tree for and with her, mostly for her. So there she is hosting a dinner. This is her. Okay, we did all that yesterday. Just have to get through. Okay, what I wanted to get to is back to your own roles, based on the interests of the person, what are the places that the role or the interest might take place. So let's just work on this for a sec. So again, with your group, or if it's sometimes group work is hard because so many people are talking in groups of 2 or 3. Just talk a little bit about where the interest that you're thinking of takes place in your community. You know, where are the people who are interested in wrestling, who are interested in drawing? And just really try to be expansive about a place. And don't limit it to the person you're thinking about. Just think about that interest and where does it take place in your community. And it's really a test of your knowledge of your community. Where does drawing happen? Where does art happen? Where does music happen? Okay, just do that for a moment. Hi, good. Have you just come in?
No, I've been up the back.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Secretary of Belonging Matters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
Okay.
a couple of down. Sorry, I couldn't come down. I was sick on the Monday.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Your name
I got
is?
the books, Tony.
Tony. Yes,
Yeah.
of course, I've heard you. Yeah, yeah, good.
So I've just been finished up the back.
Okay, good. Yeah, join this group here. Hi, I'm just doing an interactive kind of. That's good. Yeah, people are so tired of listening, I think.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and the buzz has been good. So, yeah. Yeah, I know. What a shock. But this is the stuff I love to do. Actually, this is, and you know, at this point, yeah. And it's over at 12, right? I don't want to get it wrong. Is it 12?
Over at 12 and then this next one.
Oh, we go right into, and that's not
Go
us.
into another concurrent session.
Okay, good.
What was I thinking?
I don't know. When I thought, because I said, I'm doing 2 keynotes and 1 other. And then I thought, oh no, I'm doing 2 keynotes and 2 others. And no one would. So that's good. I mean, you got me here. You may as well use me.
Sorry.
No, why are.
Is that too bright?
I can ignore it. I'm okay. Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
You're doing a great job at that.
All right. Now time is tight, so I'm gonna keep on pulling you back. Did anyone come across an interest? Did anyone come across an interest for which you couldn't find very many places in your community? Anyone struggling with anything? We could brainstorm as a large group. Okay, does anyone have an interest you'd like to brainstorm as a large group? Get ideas from other people. Yes.
I'm currently working as a jobs coach for a client of mine. We're aiming for finishing school at the end of next year to be in some form of part-time, if not full-time work.
Right?
I've only just started out, so this is awesome that we can.
Yeah.
His interests are cutting, slicing, tearing, those sorts of things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are there other bigger interests that he's interested in? Although we
I've
can.
only met him once,
Okay.
so I'm still very,
All right.
very green.
Okay, well, let's take that more abstract. For people interested in where are people cutting, slicing, and tearing? A deli? Butcher? Print shop?
Paperwork that cuts up
Yeah.
denim jeans to make paper and card.
Oh, wow.
Things like that.
Sorry, what's that? art shops, material shops. Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
Oh, the salvos or someone like that cutting up rags.
Yeah, yeah. And quilting shop.
This works do bulk shredding.
Bulk shredding, yeah. Okay. I'm thinking slicing of various kinds and shredding and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so gardening is also one of his hobbies.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Trying to avoid hobby and work
Okay.
amalgamation.
Sure, fair enough. Yeah. Good. Good. Well, that was. Pardon me?
I am very interested to know why.
When in discussions with the family, we still want him to have his work, which he enjoys, but also have his hobbies, which is not related to work. So there's that separation that he will still enjoy his gardening, his those activities.
Can I just say, you and his parents want that? What does he want? Does he want to do that as his interest and his job?
That's pretty much what I believe he's indicated to his family.
Oh,
As I said, I've only met him once.
yeah, no, but it was just the way he
Yeah.
spoke. It was what you think and what his parents think. Have you actually sat down and asked him, because he might actually enjoy it?
Yeah. So there's different ways to think about that. Sometimes a job is an opportunity to expand your horizons for people who are kind of only doing lots of one kind of thing. Your job's always a chance to kind of dabble in something else. We want to expand people's opportunities and exploring, not keep them narrow. At the same time, if someone has a passion for something like gardening, for example, you want to honor that and say, oh, you can do it in hobby kinds of ways. This is how people do it as a hobby. This is how people do it as a work, right? So we just need to really figure out who is that person? Who is that person and what makes sense right now? Is this a life that needs expanding, more opportunity, or is this someone that's telling us I'm passionate and let's kind of follow that down? Okay. But again, just a really good point, and particularly if you're in job development or helping people kind of figure out their role, you want to get around the interests and the person. You want to get a variety of perspectives. So it's not just the parents, and it's not even just the person themselves. Often people can only tell us from what they've experienced so far. You need the perspective of parents and perhaps a few other extended family members who said, I always wondered about, I thought perhaps he might try. This might be a wild and crazy idea, but I was reading the newspaper and I thought of, my nephew or something like that, right? So we really want to kind of keep understanding that people will develop and grow in front of us and continue to do that. Great. Okay. Yeah.
We had an interesting experience where Susie and I knew we had a hunch that because Susie's interests are shiny things, waving her arms and making sort of noise, we figured that the roller derby would be a really great place.
Oh.
Also because it's about wheels, not heels,
Yeah.
and it's a wonderful sort of female empowerment thing. But we didn't know how Suze might get involved in that, so we went along and we sort of just sussed it out for a while. And in the process of doing that, we discovered, by sitting behind the merch desk, we discovered that Susie was a great guard for the money, because people are actually often people are quite scared of Suze when they haven't met you and know that they're actually really wonderful. And so it would stop people from coming, like we had
too
trouble
close.
with teenagers running through and stealing the money,
Oh.
but no teenager was brave enough to come close when Suze was there. But also that Suze was amazing at giving people positive feedback when they were feeling unsure about how they might look in a t-shirt. So we had this one great example where a woman came to the desk and said, I'd really like to buy this t-shirt, I don't think it's going to fit me, I don't think it's going to be alright. She put the t-shirt on and we all turned around and said, Suze, what do you think? And as soon as we all turned around and said, Suze, what do you think? You just turned, you smiled and lit up, and the woman was like, oh, actually.
I got by it.
And so it was actually only in the process of being in
Yes.
the place that we discovered what some of the roles.
Absolutely. And I think that's,
A lot of trial and error. And in the end, it actually didn't work out. So
Yeah.
don't think that we are still
many tries. But it's,
it was enlightening to discover that.
absolutely. And so that's, in fact, what you ought to be doing anyways with lots of the places. You might think of the perfect place and you go there and the people aren't that receptive at all, You just really have to keep on trying. And what, again, I know is that there's so many different places, So if, if it is a a quilting shop or a fabric store of some kind that you think you're going to kind of center in on, there must be, hundreds of places that would have that aspect to it. And half of the fun is just understanding where those places might be in your community. It might be something like a quilting shop, a fabric shop, but it also could be, the behind the scenes rooms in a theater getting costumes ready for a production of some kind. You just don't know where that'll go. And I didn't, often what I do is I bring a newspaper along, a very, very local newspaper, and based on the interest, you just need to go through the paper and start making yourself lists and taking photographs of the things, of the different ways that people express that interest in your community. And then you get such a lovely portfolio of places to go and things to try out. And I just think it really, really widens the appreciation of our own community as well. Okay, so that's really trying to kind of find place in community, think about interest. This is the whole thing on presence, right? That people need to be present frequently and predictably. And you need to use this as a way of refining your list of places, right? And roles that people have. I told the story of Tiffany becoming an art guild member. So she's an artist, and the first thing she did was join a local art guild. And that itself was a once-a-year big gala event affair that she absolutely loves, but it's not frequent, right? And so there isn't the intensity that real relationship could come about. And so we looked around some more, and we realized that there was a coordinating committee that met monthly that she ended up joining, right? So when you kind of get your idea of places and the roles that people have, once you're well into the role, you can do some things like join an art guild that only meets once a year as kind of like the spontaneous, exciting kind of icing on the cake, but the real kind of durable pieces that you rely on have to be the pieces that people get to again and again and again and again. And for many people, even monthly, it takes too much of a lifetime to wait for that intensity. Weekly for sure, and if it's work volunteer, it might even be more often than that. So just really think about narrowing down, at least for the things that you begin with, that they are really, really intense for people, and that you have the supports, whether they're natural supports or paid supports or self-motivated supports, that people will get there on a really, really regular basis. Donna, another person within Diohago, worked on election campaign, and I kind of helped her out with two campaigns, once successfully and once not. The first one not, thank goodness. And that was just that, she was interested in being on a campaign. We kind of figured out where the campaign office was, and she can speak on her own with help, which they would give her. She could fill out an application, and I thought, she doesn't need me here. It's a time to be independent. And that was just a wrong guess on my part. She kind of signed up, and she kind of went haphazardly, and it was really an okay experience, but not really, really kind of wasn't defining her life at that point at all. And the next time an election came along, I went in with her, and I helped her to kind of rigorously sign up for a few things that they needed again and again and again. And one was the crew, where you go and put signs on people's lawns. Do you do that here? Yeah, so she went along with this steady crew, and it was lots of fun, apparently. And the other was just some very regular office work right next to the campaign organizer. And that year, after the successful election of the candidate, they actually called her up a few days before the election and said, this is where the party's going to be, and do you have a ride? Do you need a ride? That kind of thing. A way better experience, because I'd really paid attention to shoring up her presence. Okay, role. So I just wanted to say around role, this is another way. So when we, this is another way of looking at that difference. But remember, Tiffany painting was an activity, and Tiffany in the role of artist really filled her week in a whole different way. This is just another way of looking at it. At one point, there was a man we were looking at who was kind of interested in gardens and looking out and about, and actually was quite interested in doing little aspects of gardening itself. So when we really focused on the fact that he was a gardener, rather than just walking in gardens or looking at gardens. Then we did a brainstorm. So this is the kind of thing that you might do. If you're a gardener, what are the kinds of things that you might do? If you're a wrestler, what are the kinds of things that you might do? If you're really into cutting and slicing and ripping, what are the kinds of things that you might do? And generate these lists, because these are really, really helpful to you later on. So for instance, with this man, we helped him join a community garden club, and we helped him send away for some stuff. What else did we do? And then share some of his produce. So we picked 3 things that we did very, very diligently. But with this list is there, when I tell the story of Tiffany as an artist, like she's a member of the art guild, and she goes to exhibits, and she goes and sees other people's art shows, and she has a painting studio that she paints with other artists at. That slow layering came about because early on we generated a list like this, right? And then when she had some extra time on her hands and our supports and resources allowed it, we just plucked another thing from the list. And then the other thing, things like subscribing to a gardening magazine and sending away for stuff, those aren't so much pieces where where a person is in contact with other people, but it really helps them have a gardening magazine on someone's coffee table in their home, or some of the sending away for stuff. We have a Lee Valley. Do you do Lee Valley? It's really upscale, beautiful, beautiful garden stuff. It almost, but not quite, makes me want to garden. That's saying something. So when Rob had some of this stuff on his table, when people come in, there's one more thing that they can ask about, they can know about the person. So, but that wouldn't be a beginning place, right? The beginning place is for him to join the community garden and meet the same people in the summer, day after day after day, and then in the spring, not so often, in the fall, not so often. But a people intense piece is your starting point, and then these get lovely, lovely little touches that help to form the identity of gardener for a person. Okay, so you really want to generate these lists, and this is a short list of the one that we came up with, and you need to do this in a small group because it's a whole lot more fun, and you get a whole lot more ideas. Okay. All right. So that's the same. And then contribution. I was talking yesterday. I didn't have this slide, but really being clear on what are contributions that people might offer, and any volunteer situation, if you're involved in those volunteer organizations, are almost always kind of government-funded or grant-funded organizations, and they need to say how many volunteers they have. And so if the person becomes a volunteer, and often the support person along with them, that's 2 more names they can add to their list. So that in itself is a contribution, and not to forget that. And then just the time that people have. That despite her busyness, Tiffany probably has a little bit more time to make some contributions to that organizing committee, art committee, to pick up art and deliver it, and to kind of make sure brochures get from one place to the other. And so she offers that, and it is kind of gratefully received. So just understanding what a contribution that could be. And then these other unseen gifts, which, when Carolyn was working at the Central Library, many people ended up saying to her job coach, I have a neighbor, I have a son, I have a cousin, and I never even really thought of them working in a library. But now that I'm watching Carolyn, who, has her moments there, boy, I could see that might be possible. And I think that's just a wonderful contribution. I think from the library's point of view, as a public venue with some responsibility to be representative to its citizens, I think that's really, really amazing and important for them. People provide inspiration, motivation. So Rob really was the inspiration for that 4-person collaborative, putting out those books that I talked about yesterday. and often stimulus to creativity, because we have to invent different kinds of things like ramps for a wheelchair. Suddenly people with babies in strollers and elderly people with walkers, or people who aren't elderly with walkers, kind of are finding access a whole lot more easy. So just as a stimulus to creativity. There's a woman at the housing co-op where she's used a scooter, and there were no sidewalks between her and town, and she ended up being the person that made sure sidewalks were put in place, and therefore safety designed for many people. Everyone going from the co-op into town benefited from that. Okay. So one of the things that it would be good to do now for just a few minutes is the person that you're thinking about, within the role that you've thought about, what are possible contributions that they can offer in that role? Other than, the work one's a little bit tricky. It's not just the economic contribution. What else could they contribute? So do some thinking about that for a moment with the people you're talking with. Okay, I've just been given the 5-minute time here, so I'm going to interrupt you once again. Sorry about that. I'm sure that time flies faster down at this end of the world than up where I'm from. Anyways, the contribution thing, did anyone, in the short time you had, any kind of lovely little insights or nuggets around contributions you hadn't thought about?
Well, my son's 8 and, riding quite.
Yeah.
He has intellectual disability. But I've already seen him, we've been doing this for quite a long time, but I've already seen him naturally go and help other younger children on their trikes.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the...
And I hadn't noticed it until you...
Oh, lovely.
mentioned it.
Yeah, and that's the starting to notice things. I'm sorry, I forgot, I didn't get your name.
Lee.
Lee and I were just having a talk about, he doesn't even really know this gentleman who likes this slicing, chopping kind of thing, and we were just imagining what the contribution might be. And we thought that in many workplaces, for example, you might have to coerce or pressure people into kind of doing the chopping, slicing, cutting parts of their job, whereas this young man might embrace it wholeheartedly. And so it's a little bit of a contribution, a little bit of an offer to the employer that here's someone who would happily take on this task that other people might kind of try to avoid, and how that might be kind of nice for the workplace. I know a young man who joined a bowling team, and at one point, a bowling league. At one point, the head of the league said, he just bowls so much below the score of everyone else. I don't know if this is going to work out. And this absolutely amazing mother said, well, that's wonderful, because Andrew could hold the role of being the lowest scoring bowler in your league. And that means that nobody else has to feel, and he doesn't mind doing that, and nobody has to feel like I'm at the bottom of the bowling league, right? So just that kind of thinking that there's all kinds of contributions, and some of them are a bit tongue-in-cheek like that, but this understanding that there are so many ways for us to kind of do that and begin to think of your family members and what that might be.
My son, he's a keen rower, and so we've started on Friday going to the rowing club before the weekend, and we have our afternoon tea there and clean the dock in preparation for the weekend. A lot of the club members don't know we do that, but some do. And I've heard other club members say, gee, the dock's been really clean the last 2 years. It's clean as dock in Canberra.
Yeah.
So, you able to put a photo of your son doing that?
I've since put a thank you thing in the newsletter saying he's now progressing from the para rowing boat into a standard scull, and we go every Friday, and his contribution to his club is that he goes on Friday and cleans the dock.
That's great.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, so, yeah.
Our son has been a keen soccer player, however this year he hasn't progressed on at the same level as his peers. And so we were just discussing how we could possibly help him in that arena by getting him involved in becoming a junior referee or a linesman.
Yeah, wonderful. Good thinking. My son, who's just an avid soccer player, not a young man with a disability. At 16 or 17, like many other people, did not advance according to, the ones that are going to become the champion soccer players of the world. So, his moment was, who am I going to be? He did some refereeing as well, and has ended up in massage therapy for athletes, right? So, that these are natural life transitions, and many of us find another way to keep enjoying being around the thing that we love, right? Good, that's a great thinking. Anyways, I was just thinking quickly in terms of, my quick summary of some of the things that most impact the role and make it powerful is, one is a good match. It's a genuine interest that you want, and you want to kind of word that interest in typical and ordinary ways. So even if it's not as defined as a typical interest in terms of wrestling or rowing, and it might be cutting, slicing, but it's cutting and slicing, and where would that take place in ordinary communities? So you need to word it as ordinary as possible, keeping it as broad as possible, so you're not saying, well, I have someone who's absolutely interested, in only being a wrestler, and maybe that is their intention, but wrestling might be the broader and larger area, so that you're kind of prepared when the person isn't actually going to become the world champion wrestler, but what would be other things that would still be very meaningful to them. I think there's lots to learn from the layers. If you think of both Tiffany and Rob in their role, there's the main role of artist, and then there's art guild member, and then there's an art exhibitor, an art studio painter, all of these layers. And so often when we're organizing activities for people, you kind of let an activity go and you go and take on a new activity. The wonderful thing about a main role and these other layers is that you just keep adding them on, and some things you do monthly, and some things you do weekly, and some things you do daily, and it's that accumulation of things that help people identify themselves as a holder of that role and identify it to other people. So the layers, I think, was a huge learning for us. And then trying not to get really too detailed and thinking, at least for people who kind of help support kind of the development of people's lives, in 3 to 5 life-defining roles. So you don't have to do 10 or 12 or whatever. Do 3 really, really well. And if you're a family member, make sure one of those 3 is family member. And what are the contributions? What are the contributions of your family member to the rest of the family? Of your adult son or daughter living at home to making the family function? What would that be? What would that look like? For a grandson to a grandfather, from a cousin to another cousin. I was speaking with someone the other day, and just, for a sister at home towards a sister gone off to university. What might the contributions be? And one of the things I had meant to say yesterday, and you guys will get, this was really important, and don't get into, when you're thinking about contributions, what I call playing tit for tat. You don't make an offer, do something for somebody, and then sit back waiting because it's their turn to return the phone call, to return the dinner, to return the email. Just give. It's absolutely a wonderful sensation, a wonderful feeling. The wheel of life will come around, and it might come around in unexpected ways, but it really, really is helpful. The situation I was talking about yesterday was a young woman. Her sister had gone off to university, the relationship was so-so, and a support person helped that younger sister at home begin to be the best younger sister that anyone could ever want. They sent care packages off to university, they sent letters off to university, they had a chocolate or a rose or something on her pillow when she came home from university, and you can imagine how that relationship just became better and better. Anyways, I think those are the best of my nuggets for the time being around deepening and making role more powerful. I hope that was helpful, and good luck as you move forward. Thank you.